What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going over the DK healer build. The Dragonknight healers are in this sort of weird middle ground right now, and that's partially because it's still relatively uncertain whether the new set Rogue Opportunist is actually going to be useful in a Trials group. There's some evidence, mathematically based, that Rogue Opportunist might be worth running, but in actual trial scenarios, specifically kinds Aegis, it's been proven that Rogue Opportunist is actually a little bit too much of an opportunity cost to run, even on a support role. DK healers are in the best position to make the most use out of Rogue Opportunist because they do have multiple armaments, which buffs their heavy attack damage. But if Rogue Opportunist ends up not actually being all that useful in a Trials group, then DK healers are pretty much back to where they were in Herald Storm, where they're a pretty decent option for a Martial Knowledge Zen's healer, but a lot of the stuff that they can provide is better suited on DK in a different role or position, so to speak. But DK healers are still very potent healers. They're still capable of clearing all content in the game. I believe Style Anma does have a Godslayer run with a DK healer, so clearly they're able to complete the hardest challenges that the game is able to offer to them. Now, like the rest of our build videos, we won't be going over any sort of gear. That is reserved for the gear video, which is popping up in the upper right hand corner right about now. So if you're interested in knowing what sort of gear you should be running as a healer, feel free to check that out and then come back here. This will be going over just the skills and kind of a short discussion as to how healers work in ESO and what sort of separates DK healers apart from the other classes. So starting things off first with our Resto staff bar. We have Illustrious Healing as our main heal over time. We have Comet Prayer for the Minor Berserk buff as well as a burst heal. We have Fragmented Shield. This is a little bit of a flex spot here. This does provide major mending for 6 seconds, which is a very powerful buff, but it's not absolutely necessary to have major mending up all the time. That's mainly because it's actually fairly easy to, quote, overheal in this game, just because DPS typically run anywhere between 18,000 to 20,000 max health, and so if you're layering down your HOTS appropriately, it's actually pretty easy to heal up the damage that they're taking in an actual trial environment. So major mending is a little bit wasted in those scenarios, but it's still useful to have this ability on hand in case you do need some very high burst healing done. Next we have Obsidian Shard, which is our burst heal. This does deal a small amount of damage, so you do contribute a little bit of DPS if you're using this ability here. It's a little bit weaker compared to some other burst heals. It only heals 10,361 here. This is pre-buffed and before major mending, so obviously we can pump this up even higher. The main benefit of running Obsidian Shard, though, is very much like the Matriarch. It does heal 2 allies for that full amount of health, so it actually does operate as a pretty potent burst heal compared to some other burst heals from other classes. Next we have Energy Orb, obviously best heal in the game right now, along with the Healing Combustion synergy, which provides additional stamina or magicka to help sustain your damage dealers rotation. Then our ultimate is a little bit of a flex spot here. We're running Reviving Barrier for the 10% additional magicka regen that we get from the support passive magicka aid. Now moving on to our back bar, this is the Destruction Staff bar. We have Cinder Storm, which is essentially just another version of Illustrious Healing. Lasts for 50% longer, but it has a smaller radius, so you will need to be a little bit more mindful of where you place Cinder Storm compared to Illustrious Healing because of that reduced radius size. Next we have Cauterize, which is sort of a set and forget sort of heal. It heals every 5 seconds, and it is a smart heal, so it should be healing people who need it the most, but because it only heals every 5 seconds, and it's actually much weaker than Obsidian Shard, I wouldn't really rely on this as a burst heal. This is just something that is just some nice healing on the side that you can just sort of activate and then forget about for the next 15 seconds. Next we have Engulfing Flames, which is a little bit of a flex spot here as well. Normally a Mag Decay will be covering the Engulfing Flames debuff, just because they are always be able to get the 10% additional bonus damage. You can see here that we're at 9%, and we do need to get our buffs, Major Sorcery, Minor Sorcery, in order to get 10% additional bonus damage. So again, this is typically going to be on a magicka DK DPS, so if you have one of those, you don't need to run Engulfing Flames at all. However, if you are running Martial Knowledge Zens, then you should be running Engulfing Flames because it does count towards a Zen's debuff. Next we have Blockade of Storms for the off balance as well as to help proc our enchant on our back bar. Then we have another flex spot here. We're running Efficient Purge to help purge debuffs off of ourselves. Not going to be used in every single fight, but there are a couple of fights where you do want to be able to purge things. Finally, we have Aggressive Warhorn as our staple ultimate of choice with our major force. Now, in terms of other abilities you're going to want to have on hand, if you are the Zen's healer, make sure to also pick up Burning Embers for the additional dot. This will count towards that Zen's debuff. Under the Draconic Power line, Deep Breath is something you're going to want to learn in case you do need that AoE interrupt. It's actually pretty decent in the situations where you need an AoE interrupt. The benefit is, unlike Crushing Shock, which you have to aim, Deep Breath you just activate and it automatically interrupts anything within 8 meters of you. So very, very useful skill to have on hand here. Under the Earth and Heart line, one ability that you might want to consider picking up is going to be Igneous Weapons or Molten Armaments. Molten Armaments if you are running Warring Opportunist, obviously, but even Igneous Weapons could be useful because it provides Major Vitality and Major Sorcery for the entire group. Magicka DPS can run Minor Heroism Potions to get their ultimate up faster, which does end up boosting the DPS, but it is reliant on having an outside source of major sorcery. So Igneous Weapon or Molten Armaments will provide an outside source of major sorcery, allowing your Magic DPS to run those Minor Heroism Potions for more ultimates. So you could potentially run this in a flex spot here in a Magicka DPS heavy group. Under the Destro staff line, make sure to pick up Crushing Shock as a ranged interrupt. This has a 28 meter radius, so it is farther than Deep Breath, but you do have to aim it. Next we have Elemental Drain. Make sure to pick this up. Normally only one healer will be running Elemental Drain. However, that healer could be you, so just make sure to pick this up here, just in case you do have to run it in your group. Under the Resto staff line, you have Radiating Regeneration, which is really great for 4-man content since it applies a heal over time to 3 nearby allies. For Trials, it's obviously going to be weaker because you have 12 people compared to 4 people, but it's still pretty nice as a good heal over time that you can layer on top of your other heal over times. Next, we have Steadfast Ward. I personally like the Healing Ward morph. You're mainly going to be using this with the Blackrose Prison Restoration Staff. You can use this without the Blackrose Prison Restoration Staff. It's actually a pretty decent heal as well as a shielding ability, but it's not commonly used here outside of with the Blackrose Prison Restoration Staff. But it is definitely an ability you're going to want to have on hand here. If you ever need a shield, you can pick up either Hardest Magicka or Dampened Magic, whichever morph you prefer. Again, if you're running Zens, make sure to pick up Soul Trap. It does count towards the Zen's debuff here. And then we have under the Fighters Guild line, Bringer Preservation is another heal, but it also provides minor protection, so that's also very useful here. It does use stamina, and it does scale off of stamina and your max stamina and your weapon damage, so it doesn't actually heal for a lot. It's mainly just used for the minor protection there. Under the Mage's Guild line, if you still need dots for Zens, you have Entropy, either morph, and then you have Scalding Rune under the Mage's Guild line if you need those Zens dots. Typically speaking, if you have Burning Embers, Engulfing Flames, Soul Trap, or another class agnostic dot, then you have Burning Uptime from Burning Embers and Engulfing Flames, and a Poison status effect from a Poison enchant. You should be pretty good with Zen Uptime that way, but if you want some little bit more breathing room, you can definitely run Entropy or Scalding Rune. Make sure to pick up all of the Undaunted abilities here. We have Overflowing Altar for the Mana Lifesteal and the Blood Feast synergy. The Mana Lifesteal does proc things like Symphony of Blade and Sentinel of Rkugamz, those proc conditions, so definitely a nice way to proc those sets. You have Shadow Soak for the Black Widow synergy. The synergy has been nerfed a few times, but it's still essentially free damage. Then we have Inner Rage. There are a couple of strategies where the healer is going to need to taunt things, so just make sure to pick up Rage. Then we have Bone Surge. The Spell of Surge synergy is mainly used to help provide additional synergies for Alkosh and Lakessis for stamina DPS. The Major Vitality is a nice bonus for the situations where you need some additional healing power. Particularly, I'm thinking in Cloud Rest to help combat Baneful Mark. Then under the Alliance War line, pretty much covered everything that you would want to pick up. So Efficient Purge for the cleansing of debuffs, Removing Barrier for the Magicka 8 passive, but it is also useful for progression groups. Then Aggressive Warhorn for the Major Force. And that pretty much covers it for all the skills you might want to have on hand as a DK healer. Now to talk about healing in ESO. So for those of you guys who are coming from other MMOs, healers in ESO, you basically have 2 jobs. Your first job is to play as a healer, so you just heal your allies, make sure they're not dying. Your second job as a healer is to basically provide group DPS support. Essentially, you're just helping your DPS push as much damage as they possibly can, kill things faster, make them survive better, help them sustain, and so on. A lot of these sort of buffs and debuffs do come from your sets. Martial Knowledge and Zens, for example, is a debuff that you apply on the enemy. Olorime applies the Major Courage buff on your allies to help improve their weapon and spell damage, and so on. But a lot of it also does come from your abilities as well. And the bonus is a lot of your healing abilities do also cover both the healing and the buff side of things. So for example, you have Combat Prayer, which acts as a burst heal, but it also provides that minor berserk. So if you're burst healing with Combat Prayer, you're also providing minor berserk, so you're helping to improve DPS that way. Illustrious healing just by itself is a heal over time, but if you combine it with the Master's Restoration Staff, you're getting some resources back to your allies, which helps improve the duration of their rotation, because now DPS don't have to heavy attack as often, which is a DPS loss, and so on and so forth. So a lot of your healing abilities do also benefit group DPS on the side. So just because you are focusing on buffing doesn't necessarily mean you're not focusing on healing, because a lot of abilities you're using to buff your allies to help support your group do also heal as well. Now, DK healers, I've already mentioned this, are in a sort of weird middle ground right now, where if you are running Rogue Opportunist, DK healers are probably in the best spot to run the set, because they do have multiple armaments, which does boost their heavy attack damage. However, if you're not running Rogue Opportunist, then the Mag DK healer actually ends up being one of the worst healers in the game. Probably only Nightblade healers are at that same level there when it comes to desirability in a trial scenario. And part of it is due to the fact that all of the buffs that a DK healer can provide, a DK can provide in another role. So I always talked about Martial Knowledge Zens being a really good fit for a DK healer. However, you could instead put Martial Knowledge Zens on a Mag DK DPS. It will take a little bit of a DPS loss, that is true, but it's not going to be that big of a DPS loss compared to running a typical meta set setup for a Mag DK. And then you can use that Magicka healer position for a different class, like a Necromancer healer or some other healer that's able to provide a group buff that you are currently missing. With the Minor Brutality unique buff that the DK is able to provide by running something like Fragmented Shield, if you have a DK tank, they're already running Igneous Shield for the ultimate generation, so they're already providing Minor Brutality that way. If you have a Stam DK in the group, they're going to be possibly be using Stone Giant, which helps proc that Minor Brutality as well. So, as you can see, there are a lot of different buffs that Mag DK can provide, the DK healer can provide, that DKs can provide in as a tank position or as a DPS position. So the Mag DK is in this sort of weird spot where they could be very beneficial to the group if you're running this one specific set, but otherwise they're fairly lackluster. Now, in terms of their strengths, again, they're a really good fit for Martial Knowledge Zens. Their burst heal is actually pretty decent as well compared to some other burst heals, like, for example, Breath of Life, which only heals one person for the full and then a second person for half of that. So you do get the two people with the full burst heal. The other big advantage of Mag DK's healers are the fact that you can have pretty good uptime on Major Mending. You pretty much have Major Mending on demand. The only other class that has on-demand Major Mending is going to be the Wardens, and that does have a conditional where you have to heal somebody that is below a certain health threshold. Here, you just activate Fragmented Shield and you have Major Mending for 6 seconds. Now again, I mentioned this when I talked about Fragmented Shield, but it's actually fairly easy to overheal in this game because DPS, typically speaking, will be taking damage anywhere between 5k to 6k usually per tick if they're standing in red. And with all the hots that you have layered down, so you have things like Illustrious Healing, Cinder Storm, you have your Energy Orb going out. With all your hots being layered on each other, it's actually fairly easy to heal up from those relatively small hits there. So it's actually fairly easy to overheal and keep everybody up at full health here. Major Mending is not really all that beneficial in the long term, particularly if you're playing with a very experienced group. But if you are running with a progression style group, or if you're in a trial where you need additional healing strength, for example in Cladrest to help combat Baneful Mark, then that Major Mending really does start to shine there. That's one of the big advantages of running a DK healer, is you have on-demand Major Mending to really help out your healing potential. Plus, you can activate it in the middle of all of your hots being ticked down, so that way your next 6 seconds of hot ticks also get the benefit of the Major Mending as well. So whenever you need additional burst healing, you just pop your Fragmented Shield, and boom, your healing goes up by a really decent margin. But that pretty much covers it for DK healers. Now, the best way to learn how to play DK healer is obviously to play one yourself, but also to watch other people play a DK healer. The only other person I can think of that has a DK healer videos or even VODs is going to be Style Anima. I do have links in the description below to a couple of healer and endgame healers. So definitely check out their videos and their Twitch channels to take a look at how they heal, just because I don't personally heal very often in endgame scenarios. So I highly recommend checking those guys out, particularly Style Anima. I do believe she has a video on her YouTube channel of a magicka healer in Sunsparrow hard mode, so definitely a great resource there. If you guys have any questions, though, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll still try to answer them to the best of my ability, but I may direct you to another more experienced healer. But that is it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.